Welcome to Fireside Fantasy Sleep. Welcome to my channel. I am so glad you found your way here. In a world that never stands still, I want to offer you a place of peace. Together, we travel to distant lands, immerse ourselves in the legends and myths of the world, and leave the hustle and bustle of everyday life behind. My stories are crafted to gently guide you into sleep and awaken your imagination. If you enjoyed this journey and don't want to miss any future adventures, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps this channel grow and allows me to accompany even more wanderers on their path into the night. Now, lean back, close your eyes, and enjoy the silence. It's wonderful to have you as part of our community. Chapter 1. The mercy of the Queen. The air in the great hall of the Red Keep was thick. It smelled of sweat, old stone, and fear. Eddard Stark stood before the Iron Throne. His leg burned with a dull, throbbing pain. He looked at Joffrey. The boy king sat high above, looking small and cruel. Cersei Lannister stood beside him. Her eyes were cold, but there was a flicker of something else. Calculation. She had offered him a choice in the darkness of the black cells. Or honor. Not Ned looked at Sansa. She was weeping. He looked at the crowd. He saw the gold cloaks. He saw the betrayal. For his daughters, he would swallow his pride. "I am Eddard Stark," he began. His voice was raspy. "Lord of Winter, Hand of the King." He paused. A long, heavy silence filled the room. "I come before you to confess my treason." The crowd gasped. Sansa's breath hitched. "I falsely claimed that King Joffrey was not the true heir. I was wrong. Joffrey Baratheon is the one true king." Ned felt the lie like poison in his throat. "I ask for the king's mercy." Cersei stepped forward. Her voice was loud and clear. "Lord Eddard has confessed. He has shown remorse. My son, the king, is merciful." Joffrey looked annoyed. He wanted blood, but Cersei's hand was firm on his shoulder. "The king decrees," Joffrey shouted, his voice cracking, "that Eddard Stark shall be stripped of all titles. He shall be spared the axe, but he is banished. He will take the black. He will live out his days at the wall." The room erupted. Shouts of traitor and mercy. Ned felt a strange weight lift. He was alive, but he was a ghost. He was no longer a lord. He was a brother of the Night's Watch. The journey north was a blur of iron bars and cold mud. Yoren, the recruiter, kept him hidden. They traveled under the cover of night. Ned watched the landscape change. The green of the riverlands turned into the gray of the north. Every mile felt like a funeral. He had lost his friend Robert. He had lost his honor. But he had a purpose. One night, near the King's Road, Ned looked at the stars. He thought of Lyanna. He thought of the promise. The secret had stayed in his heart for 17 years. It had nearly killed him in King's Landing. Now, he was going to the one place where the truth could finally be told. To the wall, to the boy who had his mother's eyes. "Soon," Ned whispered into the cold wind. "Soon, I will tell you everything." Chapter 2. The shadow of the wall rose like a mountain of glass. It was blue. It was white. It was eternal. Eddard Stark looked up at the massive structure. He had seen it many times before. But today, it looked like a tomb. The gates of Castle Black creaked open. The sound was like a giant groaning in pain. Yoren led the wagon inside. The courtyard was filled with men in black. They looked like crows circling a dying animal. Ned stepped down from the wagon. His leg was stiff. His cloak was tattered. He was no longer the Hand of the King. He was a prisoner in his own home. "Lord Stark," a voice called out. It was full of disbelief. Ned turned. He saw Geo Mormont, the Lord Commander. The old bear looked older than Ned remembered. Beside him stood a young man. Jon Snow stood frozen. His eyes were wide. His hand gripped the hilt of his sword, Longclaw. He looked at his father. He saw the chains. He saw the gray in Ned's beard. "Father," Jon whispered. The word was small. It was full of pain. Ned walked toward him. Every step felt heavy. He reached out and touched Jon's shoulder. The boy was a man now. He was taller, stronger. Ned said. His voice was thick with emotion. "I told you we would speak again." The Lord Commander stepped forward. "This is a strange day, Eddard. The King's hand. Wearing the black, the King is dead. Ned replied, "and I am a traitor by decree. I have come to take my vows." The courtyard was silent. The other recruits watched. They saw a legend falling to earth. That night, the wind howled over the wall. It sounded like a ghost screaming. Ned sat in a small, cold room. There was a single candle. The flame flickered in the draught. A knock came at the door. It was soft. "Come in," Ned said. Jon entered. He looked lost. He sat across from Ned. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was a wall between them. "They say you tried to steal the throne," Jon said finally. His voice was flat. "I tried to do what was right, Jon." Ned looked into the candle flame. "In King's Landing, right and wrong are not the same thing." Jon looked down at his hands. "Robb is calling the banners. The North is at war. They are calling him the King in the North. They want to free you." Ned felt a cold shiver. Robb must stop. If he marches, more blood will fall. "I am a brother of the Watch now. My life is here. My wars are over." "But why?" Jon shouted. He stood up. "Why did you confess? You are the most honorable man I know." Ned looked up at him. He saw the fire in Jon's eyes. He saw the Stark temper. But he also saw something else. A regal shadow. A ghost of a prince. "Sit down, Jon," Ned said. His voice was a command. "There is a reason I am here. There is a reason I survived." Jon sat. He was trembling. "I made a promise," Ned began. He leaned forward. The candlelight cast long shadows on his face. "A promise to your mother. 17 years ago, in a tower far to the south." Jon's breath stopped. "My mother. You will tell me." Ned nodded. The weight of the secret was almost gone. "Your name is Jon Snow, but that is not the name she gave you." Chapter 3. The tower of Joitha room was silent. Only the wind outside dared to make a sound. Jon stared at Ned. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He had waited his whole life for this. "Your mother was Lyanna." The name hung in the air. It was soft. It was painful. Jon blinked. "My aunt. But how?" "They said Rhaegar Targaryen kidnapped her. They said he raped her." Ned shook his head slowly. "The world believes a lie, Jon. Rhaegar did not steal her. She loved him, and he loved her. They were married in secret." Jon felt the world tilt. He gripped the edge of the wooden table. "Married. Then, I am not a bastard." "No," Ned said. His voice was steady now. "You are a true-born son, but not of House Stark. You are a Targaryen." Jon stood up so fast his chair fell over. The wood crashed against the stone floor. "The dragon's blood? No, that is impossible. You are my father." Ned looked up at him. His eyes were full of tears. "I am your blood, Jon. I am your uncle. I gave up my honor to keep you safe. Robert would have killed you. He killed every Targaryen he could find. I saw the bodies of the royal children. I could not let that happen to you." Ned reached into his tunic. He pulled out a small, weathered piece of parchment. It was a letter, sealed with old wax. "I found her in a bed of blood," Ned whispered. "The Tower of Joy. She was dying. She placed you in my arms. She said, 'Promise me, Ned.'" Jon took the letter. His hands were shaking. He did not open it yet. He looked at Ned. He saw the man who had lied to the king, the man who had lied to his wife, the man who had carried a burden for 17 years. "Why tell me now?" Jon asked. His voice was broken. "Because the king is dead," Ned replied. "Because the realm is burning. And because here, at the wall, you are safe. The Night's Watch takes no part in the wars of kings. Here, you're just a brother. But you must know who you are. Before the fire comes," Jon looked at the candle. He thought of the black cloak he wore. He thought of the dragon kings of old. He was a Stark of Winterfell. He was a dragon of the south. He was both, and he was neither. "What do I do?" Jon whispered. Ned stood up. He walked to Jon and pulled him into a hard embrace. "You live, Jon. You serve. You protect the realms of men. Whether you are a Snow or you are the man I raised you to be." Outside, the snow began to fall harder. The secret was out. The North remembered, and the dragon had woken up in the cold. Chapter 4. The king in the North and News traveled on wings of gray. A raven arrived at Riverrun. It carried a message sealed with the golden lion of Lannister, but the words inside were about a wolf. Robb Stark sat in the solar. He looked tired. His armor was stained with the dust of battle. He had won in the Whispering Woods. He had captured Jaime Lannister, but his heart was heavy. He opened the letter. His eyes moved fast. "He is alive," Robb whispered. Catelyn Stark stood by the window. She turned quickly. Her face was pale. "What, Ned? Is he coming home?" "No," Robb said. He dropped the letter on the table. "He has taken the black. He is at the wall. He confessed to treason, Mother. He called Joffrey the true king." Catelyn grabbed the table to steady herself. "He did it for the girls. He did it for Sansa and Arya." She closed her eyes. "He is alive. Praise the gods." But the lords of the North were not praising the gods. They were angry. That night, the great hall of Riverrun was filled with the smell of roasted meat and tension. Great Jon Umber stood up. He slammed his fist on the table. The plates rattled. The wall. The Grey Jon roared. "Ned Stark is no criminal. He belongs in Winter. The Lannisters have stolen our lord and hidden him behind a pile of ice." "He took an oath," Lord Karstark said. His voice was cold. "An oath before the gods. If he leaves the wall, he is a deserter. He would be executed." "Then we march on the wall," someone shouted. "No." Robb stood up. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. "My father is a man of honor. If he gave his word, he will keep it. He would not want us to break the laws of the realm for him." The room went silent. Robb looked at his men. He looked like his father. He had the same steady gaze. "The Lannisters think they have one," Robb continued. "They think they have neutralized the North, but they are wrong. My father is safe from their axes. That means we don't have to trade Jaime Lannister for his life." A slow smile spread across the Gretchen's face. "We have the Kingslayer, and we have the North. We will not stop until Sansa and Arya are home. And if the wall is where my father must stay, then we will make sure he is the best supplied brother the Watch has ever seen." The Grey Jon drew his sword. The steel sang in the torchlight. "My sword is yours, Robb Stark, the king in the North." The shout was taken up by 100 voices. The king in the North. The king in the North. Far to the north, at Castle Black, Ned Stark felt a chill. He was standing on top of the wall. He looked south. He could not see the fires of Robb's camp, but he could feel the change in the wind. Jon walked up beside him. He was wearing his heavy furs. He looked different now, older, more dangerous. "The Lord Commander wants us in the common hall," Jon said. "A message came from the Shadow Tower. The wildlings are moving. Mance Rayder is gathering an army." Ned nodded. "The wars of kings are starting, Jon, but the real war, the only war that matters, is coming from the trees." Ned looked at Jon, the boy with the dragon's blood and the wolf's heart. "Are you ready?" Ned asked. Jon looked out into the darkness of the haunted forest. "I am a brother of the Night's Watch," he said. "I am ready." Chapter 5. Into the white waste the great range was beginning. 300 men in black stood in the courtyard of Castle Black. Horses neighed. Their breath came out in thick, white clouds. The air was so cold it felt like needles against the skin. Lord Commander Mormont sat on his great horse. He looked at Ned Stark. Ned was dressed in boiled leather and heavy wool. He had no sigil on his chest, no direwolf. "Just the black." "You don't have to do this," Eddard Mormont said. "You are a man of 50. You could stay here. You could manage the stores." Ned tightened the cinch on his saddle. "I did not come here to hide, Jor. I came to serve, and I know the North better than any man alive." Jon Snow watched them. He was assigned to the Lord Commander as a steward, but he stayed close to Ned. They were a pair now, the uncle and the nephew. The secret was a bond stronger than iron. "Open the gate," Mormont shouted. The massive iron bars rose. The tunnel was dark and dripping with ice. As they rode through, the temperature dropped even further. They emerged on the other side. The haunted forest lay before them, a sea of black trees and white snow. For days, they rode in silence. The forest was too quiet. No birds sang. No squirrels moved. It was as if the woods were holding their breath at night. They sat by small fires. Ned and Jon shared a tent. "Do you feel it?" Jon asked one night. He was sharpening his sword. The rasp of the stone was the only sound. The cold, Ned asked. No. Jon looked at the tent flap. The eyes. Something is watching us. It doesn't feel like wildlings. Ned remembered the stories. The old Nan's tales. The White Walkers. The long night. He used to smile at them. He didn't smile now. Benjen is out here somewhere, Ned said softly. His brother had been missing for months. We find the wildlings, we find Mance Rayder, and maybe we find Benjen. And if the stories are true, Jon asked, if the dead are walking? Ned looked at Jon. He saw the Targaryen fire in his eyes. Then we do what Starks have always done. We stand, we hold the line. Fire and blood, Jon, winter is coming. Both are true now. Jon nodded. He understood. He was the bridge between the two. The next morning, they reached Craster's Keep. It was a foul place. It smelled of pigs and rot. Craster was a cruel man who married his own daughters. Ned felt a deep disgust. The wildlings are gone, Craster spat. He looked at Ned with yellow eyes. Mance has them all. They are heading for the Frostfangs. They are looking for something in the high ice. What? Mormont asked. Power. Craster laughed. It was a wet, nasty sound. The cold gods are waking up. Crows. You should have stayed behind your wall. That night, Ned stood guard outside the keep. He looked at the stars. They were bright and cold. He thought of King's Landing. It felt like a dream from another life. He was a different man now. He was a soldier in a war that the world didn't even know existed. Jon walked up to him. I can't sleep, he said. Look at the horizon, Jon. Ned pointed north. A faint blue light was flickering in the distance. It wasn't the sun. It wasn't a fire. It was something else. Something ancient. The real enemy is there, Ned said, and we are the only ones who can stop it. Chapter 6. The fist of the first Menthe wind, on top of the fist of the first men, did not just blow. It bit. It was a hungry wind that wanted to freeze the blood inside their veins. 300 brothers of the Night's Watch had made camp on this ancient hill. They had dug trenches. They had sharpened stakes. But the air felt wrong. Ned Stark stood at the edge of the stone ring. He looked out into the vast white darkness. Beside him, Jon Snow held a torch. The fire flickered wildly, casting long, dancing shadows against the snow. They are coming, aren't they? Jon asked. His voice was steady, but his eyes were searching the trees below. The cold is too deep, Jon, Ned replied. He adjusted the heavy black fur on his shoulders. This is not a winter storm. This is something else. Suddenly, a horn blasted. A long, low sound that echoed off the mountains. One blast. Rangers returning. The men in the camp paused. They waited. Then, a second blast followed. 2 blasts. Wildlings. The brothers drew their swords. Bows were notched. But then, a third blast came. It was longer than the others. It sounded like a scream that would never end. 3 blasts. The others? Gods, someone whispered. The darkness at the bottom of the hill began to move. It wasn't a wave of men. It was a wave of shadows. Thousands of them. They moved with a strange, jerky rhythm. And their eyes, they glowed with a pale, icy blue light. Archers. Lord Commander Mormont roared. Fire. A rain of flaming arrows hissed through the air. They lit up the night for a brief second. Ned saw them. Thousands of dead men. Some were skeletons. Some still had flesh hanging from their bones. They were the Whites. And behind them, riding on horses that were nothing but bone, were the White Walkers. The battle was a nightmare of ice and steel. The Whites climbed the hill like spiders. Ned fought with a heavy long. He was old, but his arm was still strong. He cut down a dead man, then another. But for every one he killed, 3 more took its place. Jon. To the Lord Commander, Ned shouted. He saw Jon fighting with long. The Valyrian steel blade glowed in the dark. When Jon struck a White, it didn't just fall, it shattered. The steel, Ned realized. Valyrian steelworks, but they were being overrun. The Night's Watch was breaking. Mormont was wounded. The Gragian's son, who had come north to bring supplies, was pulled down by a dozen cold hands. We have to retreat. Mormont cried out. Back to the wall. Ned looked at the sea of dead. If they didn't stop them here, the wall would not be enough. He looked at Jon. He saw the future of the realm in that boy's face. the dragon, and the wolf. Jon, take the Lord Commander. Ned grabbed Jon's arm. Go now. I won't leave you. Jon yelled over the screams of the dying. You have to. Ned's voice was like iron. You know the truth now. You are the only one who can unite the living. Tell Robb, tell the world. Winter is here. Jon, go. Ned pushed Jon toward the remaining horses. He turned back to the line of ice. He picked up a fallen torch in one hand and his sword in the other. He was Eddard Stark. He had survived the dungeons of King's Landing. He had survived the betrayal of a queen. He would not fall to a pile of bones. Come on then. Ned roared at the darkness. I am the North. As Jon looked back one last time, he saw his uncle standing alone against a tide of blue eyes, a single spark of fire in a world of ice. Chapter 7. The message in the Snotha retreat from the Fist was a trail of blood and frozen tears. Of the 300 who went north, only a handful remained. Jon Snow rode at the front, supporting a bleeding Lord Commander. His heart was a stone in his chest. He could still hear Ned's voice. I am the North. They reached Craster's Keep in a blizzard. The men were broken. They were hungry, and they were angry. He's gone, Samwell Tarly whimpered, his face white with fear. Lord Stark. He stayed behind. He's dead, Jon. Jon didn't answer. He looked at the horizon. He didn't believe it. A man like Ned Stark did not just vanish, but there was no time for grief. Mutiny was brewing in the dark corners of the keep. The brothers were turning on Mormont. We have to go, Jon whispered to Sam. If we stay here, we die by the hands of our own brothers. Under the cover of the storm, Jon, Sam, and a few loyal men fled south. They carried the most important thing in the world, the truth, not just about the dead, but about the blood in Jon's veins. When they finally reached the wall, the news had already arrived. A raven from the Shadow Tower had seen the fires on the Fist. The realm believed Eddard Stark was dead in the south. The news hit like a hammer. Robb Stark, the king in the north, sat in his tent near him. He did not weep. He did not scream. He simply drew his sword and carved a deep line into the wooden table. First, my grandfather, Robb said, his voice trembling with rage. Then my father's honor, and now his life. The Lannisters sent him there to die, Catelyn said, her voice cold as a grave. They knew the wall was a death sentence. Then we march, Robb stood up. Not for the throne, not for the Riverlands. We march for vengeance. We burn the south until there is nothing left but ash. But before the drums of war could sound again, a rider arrived at the gates of Riverrun. He was dressed in rags and black fur. He was exhausted, his horse foaming at the mouth. It was Jon Snow. He did not go to the Great Hall. He went straight to Robb the Two. Brothers one, a king. One, a crow stood face to face for the first time in a year. He told me, Jon gasped, clutching a piece of parchment. He told me everything, Robb, before he fell. Robb looked at the letter. He saw the seal of Lyanna Stark. He saw the words of his father. He's not your father, Robb, Jon said, tears finally falling. He's my uncle. He lied to the world to save me. He took the black to protect the secret, and he stayed on that hill so I could bring this to you. Robb read the letter. His face changed from anger to shock, and then to a strange, terrifying calm. He's a Targaryen, Robb whispered. He looked at Jon. You are the true heir. Not Joffrey, not Stannis. You. I don't want a crown, Robb, Jon shouted. I want my father back. I want the man who raised us. He gave his life for this truth. Jon, Robb said, stepping closer. He survived King's Landing so the dragon could wake up in the north. If we don't use this, if we don't finish what he started, then his sacrifice means nothing. Robb turned to his lords, who were gathered at the door. The war has changed. Robb roared. We are not fighting for a Stark king anymore. We are fighting for the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. And we are fighting for the man who is still out there, somewhere in the cold. Far to the north, deep in the haunted forest, a figure moved through the snow. His cloak was torn. His sword was broken. But his eyes were gray, not blue. Ned Stark was breathing, and he was not alone. Chapter 8. The wolf and the dragon, the north, was no longer just at war. It was on fire. The news of Jon's true lineage spread like a wildfire through the camps of the Riverlands and the mountain clans. But it was not a crown that the men whispered about. It was the sacrifice of Ned Stark. Robb Stark and Jon Snow stood over a map of the wall. They were in Winterfell now. Robb had marched north, leaving the war with the Lannisters behind. The threat in the south felt small compared to the darkness Jon had described. "The lords are calling you the White Wolf, Jon," Robb said. He looked at his brother, his cousin. "They want to crown you. They say a Targaryen father and a Stark mother is the only king who can lead us through the long night." Jon shook his head. He looked at the empty seat where Ned used to sit. "I am a brother of the Night's Watch, Robb. I took a vow. And I didn't come here for a throne. I came for him. We don't even know if he's alive," Robb said softly. "He is," Jon insisted. "I feel it. He survived the Red Keep. He survived the Black Cells. He is a Stark. He won't die in the snow." Suddenly, the doors of the great hall burst open. A scout ran in, covered in frost. "A rider." The man gasped. "From the king's... He carries a message from the wall." Robb and Jon ran to the courtyard. A black brother was waiting, his horse shivering. He handed Jon a small frozen piece of leather. Inside was a ring, a silver ring with a chipped sapphire. "That's Benjen's," Jon whispered. "Where did you find this?" "A man brought it to the gate," the messenger said. "He was dressed in wildling furs. He said he found it in the High Frost Fangs," he said. "The hand is waiting at the Bridge of Skulls." Jon looked at Robb. "It's a trap. Or it's him." "We take the army," Robb said. "Every man. Every wolf. If my father is at that bridge, I will tear down the wall itself to get him back." The march north was the fastest in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. 10,000 Northmen, led by the king in the north and the dragon of the wall. They reached the Bridge of Skulls as the sun was setting, casting a bloody red light over the ice. Across the bridge, a line of figures emerged from the mist. They weren't whites. They were white. And in the center, supported by a man with a scarred face and a black cloak, was Eddard Stark. He looked like a ghost. His hair was white. His arm was in a sling made of hide. But when he saw the banners of House Stark, he stood tall. Jon and Robb ran across the bridge, ignoring the cries of their guards. They reached him at the center. "Father," Robb cried, catching him as he stumbled. Ned looked at them. He looked at Robb's crown. He looked at Jon's eyes. He smiled, a slow, painful movement. "I told you," Ned whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "I told you I would see you again." "How?" Jon asked, tears blurring his vision. "How did you survive the fist?" Ned looked at the man beside him. It was Benjen Stark. He looked half dead, his skin pale and cold, but he was alive. "Your uncle found me," Ned said. "The wildlings, Mance Rayder. They didn't want to fight us. They were running from the same thing we were. We made a pact, Jon. A pact in the dark." Ned looked at the army behind his sons. He saw the thousands of spears. He saw the unity. "The war in the south is over," Ned said, his voice growing stronger. "The Lannisters don't matter. The Iron Throne doesn't matter. The dead are at the gates." He looked at Jon. "Did you tell him?" "I told him," Jon said. Ned nodded. He turned to the lords of the north, who had gathered at the end of the bridge. "I am Eddard Stark," he shouted, his voice echoing off the ice walls. "I have returned from the grave to tell you the truth. The enemy is not in King's Landing. The enemy is here, and if we do not stand together, the sun will never rise again." The great Jon drew his sword. "The wolf has returned." The cry went up, shaking the very foundations of the wall. But as they cheered, a cold wind blew from the north, a wind that smelled of ancient ice and death. The long night had begun, and Ned Stark was ready to lead them one last time. Chapter 9. The last stand of the Wolf the Long Night had fallen. The sun had not risen for 3 days. The only light came from the massive bonfires built along the top of the wall and the glowing blue eyes in the darkness below. The army of the living was a strange sight. Northmen stood shoulder to shoulder with wildlings. Knights of the Riverlands stood beside brothers of the Night's Watch. At the center of it all stood 3 men: Robb, the king; Jon, the dragon; and Ned, the shield. "They are here," Jon whispered. He could feel it in his blood. The air grew so cold that the torches began to flicker and die. A screech tore through the sky. It was a sound of grinding ice. The White Walkers did not use ladders. They did not use rams. They simply brought the winter. The base of the wall began to crack. The magic of the ancients was fading. If the wall falls, the north falls, Ned said. He looked at his sons. He was wearing his old armor, the gray plate of Winterfell. He looked younger in the firelight. The wariness was gone. He had a purpose. Jon, you lead the center, Ned commanded. Robb, take the cavalry to the eastern slope. I will hold the gate. Father, no, Robb said. The gate is where the pressure will be greatest. Ned smiled and touched Robb's cheek. I am a brother of the Night's Watch, Robb. This is my duty. I have lived a life of lies and shadows. Let me end it in the light. The battle was a chaos of white and black. The dead threw themselves at the wall in a mountain of flesh. Giants, now nothing but bone, hammered at the iron gates. Ned stood in the tunnel, the narrowest point. He held a blade of dragonglass in one hand and a torch in the other. Hold the line, Ned roared. His voice was the only thing keeping the men from fleeing. Outside, Jon Snow was a whirlwind of Valyrian steel. He fought a White Walker, their blades clashing with a sound like breaking glass. Jon was faster, stronger. He shattered the creature into 1,000 shards of ice. But more were coming. The Night King appeared on the horizon, riding a dead horse. He raised his arms. The fallen brothers of the Night's Watch began to rise, their eyes glowing blue. He's bringing them back. Jon shouted. Ned saw the danger. If the dead rose inside the tunnel, the gate would fall from within. He looked at the barrels of pitch lined along the walls. He looked at the torch in his hand. Jon, Robb. Ned's voice echoed through the chaos. They looked toward the gate. Ned was standing alone in the tunnel, surrounded by the rising dead. He looked at them one last time. There was no fear in his eyes, only peace. Remember the North, Ned shouted. Remember the promise. He dropped the torch. The explosion was deafening. The pitch ignited, turning the tunnel into a furnace of orange flame. The fire consumed the whites. It consumed the gate. And it consumed the man who stood within. The heat was so intense it sent a shockwave through the ice. The Night King recoiled. The fire was a barrier he could not cross. The sacrifice of Eddard Stark had bought them the time they needed. Inspired by their father's death, Jon and Robb led a final, desperate charge. With the fire at their backs and the fury of the North in their hearts, they drove the White Walkers back into the darkness. Jon reached the Night King. With a single, perfect strike of Longclaw, he ended the war. The blue eyes went dark. The whites collapsed into piles of bone. The long night was over, as the first rays of a pale gray sun rose over the horizon. Jon and Robb stood at the ruins of the gate. The fire had died down. There was nothing left but ash and a single blackened sword hilt. He saved us, Robb whispered, falling to his knees. He did more than that, Jon said, looking at the rising sun. He showed us how to live and how to die. Years later, a statue was carved in the crypts of Winter. It was not a lord. It was not a hand. It was a man in a black cloak, holding a torch. The inscription did not mention his titles. It simply said, Eddard Stark, the wolf who held the gate. He kept his promise. The 7 kingdoms were at peace. A Stark sat in Winterfell. A dragon sat in King's Landing. And the North remembered the man who chose life, so that the world would not have to choose death.